Thank you, Rebecca. It was very informative. I think one of the things that I've certainly gathered from this particular presentation is with the knowledge that we're living in this new era of the Anthropocene and understanding that human beings are having such an impact all over the earth, along with that comes a responsibility to use whatever knowledge that you can gather and make the appropriate decisions for your people and for future generations. And each of these projects, I think, I find a lot of encouragement and optimism in what I've seen here today. We have American Indian nations and First Nations working with government, with corporations on these sort of projects that really are going to add value and work towards this cause of sustainability around the earth. So it's not all bleak. We get a lot of information and news all the time about what's going on with respect to climate change and all the negative impacts of that. But what we're seeing here today is what you can actually do and where it's actually really happening, and happening in a big and serious way. So I want to thank all of our presenters today for the excellent job that they've done. And at this point, we want to bring them back out on stage for a question and answer period. So if we can do that, Elizabeth. There is a microphone, I believe, in the back center aisle there. If anybody has any questions or comments, please use that microphone. We are recording and webcasting this symposium, so we want to make sure that people who are watching on their computers can actually hear the questions as well. I wanted to start, if I could, with a question directed at Aletha and Ava. Obviously, as tribal leaders, you're concerned with a variety of interests and issues within your communities, range from health to economic development. With respect to these solar and renewable energy projects, how much did the cultural values, some of those old, or not old, but the profound cultural narratives of your cultures, how much does that also come to play in terms of these projects and your decisions to make, to go forward on these projects?
Well, excuse me, that's really important on our reservation, we try to make sure that we do have a cultural committee that do observe everything that happens on our reservation. They're always a part of our, whenever our solar projects are being located in different areas. We're starting a new one, 2 more. So our culture is always involved in all our land, trying to preserve what we have there. But they are very important on our reservation. We make sure that any company that comes on our reservation wanting to do some business with us, we always make sure our culture is involved in everything we do.
Ava?
Yeah, it's important to us too, the cultural of our and I think I mentioned that how important the land and the culture is to our people. And one of the important components of any project that we get involved in is with the archaeology. We bring in experts who are doing archaeology work, and they do different stages of archaeology work. And in fact, we're still doing that on the Samsung project. We have monitors there that are overseeing all the work that people are doing, and if anything happens, and they bring that to our attention right away, because it's so important too that our ancestors are protected as well in any of this work that people are doing. So it's a big component of any project that we're going to get involved in. And any of the proponents, because we don't always have the resources to bring in the experts we need. One of the things we do when we start negotiating our term sheets is ensuring that they give us capacity dollars so that we can bring in the experts, not only archaeology, but people that will do environmental assessments as well. So they help fund that before we even start doing any of the work.
Thank you. And Rebecca, with this technology that you've developed, I must imagine you're getting inundated. And how many contacts are you getting from Indian country?
Well, NCAI, I think, represents right there more than 400 Native American tribes. We've got, I think, probably at least a dozen in Canada. There are more than 400 tribes in the Amazon. We're working with the Maori in New Zealand, Aboriginal people in Australia, as you saw. I haven't counted it all up, but probably more than 1,000 tribes, I would say.
Well, the applications are really quite broad and quite significant. Any questions from the audience? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, hello. This is specifically for Rebecca, but any of you are welcome to answer it, and thank you for your presentations. They were great. I have the privilege of working with both tribal colleges in my work and Alaska Native villages, and we're really interested in doing that handheld monitoring, and specifically right now uploading data, environmental data, to coincide with climate change indicators. And I was just wondering if you are doing anything in that realm right now, and if you were thinking about working with tribal colleges, if you are now, or if you're thinking about it in the future.
Yeah, great questions. So first of all, yes, we would love to develop some kind of targeted training for the tribal colleges. Working with NCAI, we've already begun discussion of that. Maybe as soon as next year, we might be able to do a workshop at one of the annual gatherings of representatives from the tribal colleges to see if we can create some really good curriculum that could then be disseminated. But I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards if you want to talk more about that. And you mentioned handhelds. I think you're talking about using these smartphone devices. I think that is totally the way of the future, kind of that any one of us can go out and kind of be a sensor. We can go out and we can measure information using these devices and automatically timestamp, date stamp, GPS locate, have it go on a map, have it go into a database, and collaborate with others on really meaningful projects, collecting environmental data that can then be combined with other information and used for example, that's exactly what the Sotowee people are doing to do their carbon project. That methodology had to itself be certified by the Voluntary Carbon Standard in order for them to accept. And there was really some question about could Indians in the Amazon actually collect scientifically credible data? Well, it turned out they did, in fact, using these mobile devices. They collected very, very high quality data. So I think, yes, we have tutorials on that, and again, I'd be happy to talk more with you about that if you're interested. Did that answer the question? Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, use the microphone, please.
Hi, my questions. I just want to say, as a member of the Chemehuevi Indian tribe and being born and raised in Las Vegas, thank you, Chairwoman Tom. The work you're doing out there is very inspiring. Ms. Moore, it's already been kind of a theme that some Native nations don't have the resources to get the experts that they need. And the work that you're doing, I was unaware of until today, and it also seems very inspiring. However, how do you address that lack of resources to get the experts, and how does that, somebody has to be paying for this work, but sometimes tribes don't have those resources. How do you address that, and how do you work with the tribes that don't have the resources?
No, that is a great question. So one of the great things about many of our tools is they're free. Google Earth is free. Google Maps is free. We have tools that allow you to, annotate those maps with your own information that are free. And we work very, very hard to make them easy to use. So you don't have to go off and get a PhD in something in order to be able to create basic maps or get basic information from our tools. The trainings that my group does are free. We're trying as much as possible to scale those trainings. So I love the previous question about the tribal colleges, because if my team can train tribal colleges and tribal colleges can train other people and our tools are free, that starts to address the question of limited resources. The other thing is that when you use the web, when you use the internet, that is a very powerful framework for engaging with experts. So for example, the Sotowee Carbon Project, if experts had to be hired to go in and measure the tree diameter and do the survey they had done, it would have been more than $1 million, right? But the people themselves did that. They collected the data themselves. And the data, as they collected it, it went online and it was verified by experts. You know, you can collect it, it can be looked at immediately, and advice can be given by experts who may be remote back to those local communities saying, oh, maybe you didn't measure that right, do this differently next time. So again, I think there's this exciting ability to use the web to link remote experts very cost effectively, right, with local communities who are learning new skills and doing the work themselves. Does that make sense?
It does, yes, but it raises a follow-up question. What if there's a competing perspective on what this land means, or there's a dispute about whether or not it's an actual valid assessment?
Yeah, so we don't, as Google, we don't take a position on these things. It's just like anyone can publish a web page. You can have a Democratic point of view or a Republican web page or whatever you want. The same thing actually can be true of map data. You can have people collect different types of information, but the point is when it is all online and you have something like objective satellite imagery, objective information that things can be compared against, it kind of raises the level of the dialogue. I mean, I've seen often, even in my community, that there would be huge amounts of debate over the basic facts of the situation because different people had different information. There was kind of an information imbalance. Some people had more, often companies or government has more information than the people have. But when you have this kind of, you have all the satellite data, you have all of this. We have more than 20 petabytes of satellite data, 20 billion megabytes of satellite data, in Google Earth and Google Maps. It kind of raises all boats, like everyone has a better common picture of, for example, an environmental situation. But again, anyone can bring in data on top of that and have a debate.
That seems like the best way to do it. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
If I can just add, when you're talking about the lack of resources, because we find that when proponents come, and I had mentioned earlier, proponents come and want us to get involved in a project, but one of the first things we do is that we enter into capacity development agreements with them, where we are asking them to provide the dollars so that we can get the experts that we need to do proper assessments for us before we decide to go ahead with that project. So they're putting up money right at the beginnings, so we don't have to put any in before we decide to even go ahead with it. And I was really interested in your presentation as well, because I think that's another tool we can use not only with the projects we want to get involved with, but with our whole land rights struggle that we're doing. And I had some maps up there, and I think we're certainly going to follow up with Rebecca on how we can utilize those at Six Nations and in proceeding with our land rights struggles.
Hello, my name is Brooke Wheeler. I'm an intern here at the National Museum of the American Indian, and I have a question for Rebecca. Have you worked with tribal colleges or tribal museums in specific about bringing collections into the Google Map-like structure to tell a story of the tribe? Have you guys worked with that yet?
Well, I think the basic question was, have we worked directly with the tribal colleges?
Oh, tribal museums, sorry.
Oh, tribal museums.
Yeah.
There's something, I'm not an expert on this, but there's something called the Cultural Institute that Google has created that is specifically for museums, and it is a very beautiful way to present artifacts, digital representations of like 3D objects. You can even create a virtual walk through an exhibit. And I believe that NCAI is looking at using that for some tribal museum, to capture that digitally and share it with the world.
What was it called again?
It's called the Cultural Institute, or the Cultural Institute. If you just do Google Cultural Institute, you'll learn about it.
I had another question for anybody. what, when it comes to bringing these sustainable industries into your reservation, did you face any opposition or challenges from your own tribal members, and how did you deal with that?
Yeah, we do. We always do, because I think, as any government, you always got opposition. I think anybody who's involved in politics can say that. But how we've tried and dealt with it is we have community engagement sessions. As I said, we have our own website. People can contribute, and they can put in their opinions. Some people are going to be opposed to anything that we do as a government, no matter how wonderful it is. But we give them the opportunity to come to community sessions. We have 3 or 4 focus group sessions. We're very transparent, very accountable, and people have the right. But then in the end, when people can, if they don't want to speak up, they can fill out comment cards. They can go on the website. So we just try to do as much outreach as we can to community members, and then when we get back the results, we do an assessment and look at all of the responses that we get. The staff does an analysis of it, and then they make a recommendation back to us. And I know, as I mentioned in my presentation, there was one project that we had where the majority of the community said, no, we don't want it. Although we thought it was probably a very good project for our community, we turned it down because the community didn't want it. So we really do outreach to our community members through those engagement sessions and through the consultation and accommodation team that we have. They do all the analysis, all the assessments, and we take that out to the community, and we rely on what the community comes back and tells us.
Thank you.
I was wondering, Aletha and Ava, now that you're renewable energy producing First Nations and American Indian nations, what's the trend line on this? Are you hearing from other American Indian nations and First Nations across your respective countries greater interest in getting into this field?
Yeah, we are. I know last year I was invited out, even before our project was finalized, we were invited out to Osoyoos, which is one of the most, economically driven communities in British Columbia, to do a presentation on it, and I think one of the reasons that people are really looking at our project is because our partner is Samsung. And Samsung is like the 5th largest company in the world. And I think we're very fortunate to have them as a partner, and not only them, but the other companies of Connor, Clark, and London Pattern. And we're very proud of the partnership we have them. And I think people are really looking at us to see how successful it's going to be, because that's the way things are going now with renewable energy. And I think we're going to be a pioneer in that, and one of the leaders. And I know that a lot of people across the country are approaching us, wanting us to come out and make presentations about what we're doing, and they're watching to see how it's going to progress and if it's going to be successful. And because I think that they're also getting inundated with requests from people. But I know, Samsung's our biggest one, but we're getting a lot of other requests as well. And it's important for us because, as I said, we have to start generating revenue for our community, and this is one of the best ways we see of doing that right now, in addition to other things we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. And Aletha, what's happening in this respect in Indian country in the United States? The tribes getting into renewable energy development, is there an increase? Are you finding there's an increase in that?
Yes. Yes, there is. In the renewable energy, we're really working towards that, because our people in the past have suffered very much, and it has been a great big change on our reservation from way back in the earlier years, and we look at it as something future for our children. We'd never have thought that this would ever occur. Like I said in the presentation, that when these things happen from way back in our ancestral days, our lands are very important to us. So the renewable energy, now we're trying to educate our people about the renewable energy, what it means to the tribes, what it means to all tribes in Indian country. Our children are not really aware of it, but they are beginning to be aware of it on our reservation. We try to educate them and also try to keep them informed and teaching them also about the past generation, from the past era to the new era, 21st century. So it's really important for our children to know as well what our renewable energy is all about, and what the Nevada Power, the Reed Gardner is about, why it's so important to shut it down, because a lot of our people are ill from that. I'd like to share one story about a couple of chairmen that we had on the reservation. They worked for the Reed Gardner at the time. It was called Nevada Power, and they worked for them for years and years, and they both became tribal chairmen of the reservation. And about 3 years ago, one of the chairmen passed away because of cancer, and the other one is he's retired from the chairmanship. He was the longest, held the longest term as a chairman on my reservation. He now has cancer, and both these two are my brothers. They were chairmen for our reservation. So they worked for the Reed Gardner for many, many years. One was a coal, he worked in the coal area, and my other brother worked in the switch area. So we've had many tribal members that worked there. We had an agreement with the coal plant in the past. They were providing scholarships to our native people. And if we hired some of our people there, they hired our people there, they would train them to become whatever they wanted to be there. If they had a drug problem or alcohol problem, they would send them to a rehab and hire them back. So they really worked hard with this in the past, but now it has become more than that to our people. We didn't know that this was going to be a suffering time for our people back in the days, but now it has happened. So now we're looking towards helping our young people, our young children. And a lot of our children have asthma, and there's so much illness now. And so we really look forward to the new clean energy for our reservation. We're working really hard towards it. We've got 3 of them on our reservation now. With First Solar is also adding 1 more. So, and then we're having another one, Res America. Now they are also going to be able to help us, and we're hiring so many people right now. We've hired about 50 people. We'll be hiring about 200 to 400 people at the end of the year. So Nevada Power, which is Reed Gardner now, they've shut down 3 of their smaller stacks. At the end of 2017, they'll be shutting down the entire Reed Gardner.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Sego, my name's Josh Claus. I'm Mohawk from Six Nations. Just wanted to say thank you for the investment that Six Nations made in my education. I'm a lawyer down here in DC now. And not to play favorites, but I do have a question for Chief Hill. As tribal nations and First Nations are approached by potential business partners, what advice would you have for them how to vet those relationships and make sure it's a good investment for the community? Because in my experience, there are a lot of folks that see, big opportunity in Indian country, but may not be the correct, the correct partners for Indian country.
Yep, you're absolutely right. I know. I just came from a conference in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which was all Ontario or all Canada Chiefs Conference. And when you go to those, you go out in the hallway and you get inundated with all these consultants that want to have the best deal for you. Mm-hmm. They're phoning, they're emailing, and that's why we have our consultation and accommodation team in place. They're in place to meet with them. They have to do all the due diligence even before they make a recommendation to come to council. So they'll do all the research, all the research that's necessary to be done before they even make a recommendation to us. And that's why even before we get to the next step of asking them to provide capacity development dollars. So the team's in place, they meet with them, they assess them, and then they will eventually make the recommendations for us. And I just want to introduce our Matt Jameson. Matt, if you want to stand up. Matt is the director of he's the director of economic development. He's one of our key players in doing those assessments. And I know we're going to get together with you later, Josh, because you're from Six Nations, and we're glad to see you. So, and Matt, as I said, is one of the key players in that team that does all the due diligence and the research that's so necessary, because you're right, they are knocking on our doors all the time, and we want to make sure we don't get into investments where we're going to end up losers.
Okay, we're over time, but I'll allow one more question or comment, if any. Okay, I think we're all set here. So please join me in thanking Aletha Tom, Ava Hill, and Rebecca Moore. And enjoy the Living Earth Festival the rest of the weekend. Thank you very much, everyone.